Well, here we are. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the All Portable Discussion Zone. It is a bi-weekly live stream all about amateur radio portable ops. My name is Charlie. Call sign is November Juliet 7 Victor, and with me this evening are one of the two show's co-hosts, Dan KC7MSU. I believe Brian at W7JET will be along shortly. And I'm also pleased to introduce you tonight's guest, Howard, WB2UZE from Long Island. He was on the show just, I don't know, 2 or 3, maybe 4 episodes ago, and we were glad to have him back. We didn't really get a chance to cover everything we wanted to, so we have him back with us. And of course, as always, we have the regular characters in the chat room. We're happy you could join us this evening. Hope you'll stick around. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat feed, and we will do our best to respond to them. And maybe do an @Red Summit RF so that we know that you have that question coming our way. Also, don't forget that this show is converted to a podcast and is available through most podcast players about 24 hours after the show goes on. And so also, if you want to support us, you can do so by buying us a Coke down there at the bottom of the link. At the bottom of the show, there's a link. And so let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about what's been going on for the last little bit with our co-hosts and guests, and then we'll dive right in. So Dan, what do you got for us? You're muted. Why don't I go while you're looking for your mute button? Oh, there you go.
All right. Not a whole lot. Just been working around the house, doing a little practice on my CW finally. And today was the VHF contest. Unfortunately, I missed out on it, but I heard a few folks out there on the hills today, so that was pretty exciting.
Cool. So that you've been chasing a little bit then?
I have been trying to chase more and more. There's been quite a few folks out on the hills lately, so it's been pretty good, especially on VHF. There's been quite a bit of activity.
Okay, great. All right. Well, for me, let's see, what have I been doing? I think the most recent thing I did, I was talking to Howard offline on what was it? Friday. I went out to do a Parks on the Air, and it had nothing to do with soda. Crazy. Call me crazy. I went out to a place called Agua Fria, a national monument, and set up there. I think I was on the air maybe 3 hours. Had 250 contacts, and a couple of people from Spain and Costa Rica and Puerto Rico. It was really a fun time. So that's kind of what I had. And then tomorrow, my wife and I are going to go out and do 3 soda summits. So I've been pretty busy with doing stuff myself. Let's go ahead and see what Howard's been up to. I know you were on a show recently, yesterday, weren't you?
Charlie, is your wife a ham too?
Yeah, she is.
Wow, that's terrific. That's terrific. I could never get anybody else in my family to be interested in this hobby. My daughter during the COVID lockdown took some CW classes, but then boys and college came along, and that was it.
Yeah. Yes. What have you been up to?
Well, I got a second chance on 160 meters. For about 5 years in a row, I had 10 over 9 noise level. I called the power company, and they blamed it on the cable company having leakage down about a half a mile from my house, and I never got anywhere. I had a workaround where I would be using web SDRs to be able to, if I wanted to work Europe, I would listen to Europe on the web SDR, and I would hear the stations that were calling me. But now the noise level is down to S4. And I'm really jumping in on this and taking advantage of it until it comes back again. I hope it never does, but it's very nice to hear 160 on my own receiver.
Yeah, that's awesome. 160, man. I've never even touched 160 yet.
Well, I'm using a 43-foot vertical, which is very short for 160, Charlie, but I have a remote matching unit that's at the base. And that actually takes care of the terrible mismatch. And I have 106 countries on 160 now.
100 wow, that's great.
Yeah. All CW though.
That's all CW. Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, of course, has to be, right? All right. Well, let's see. Guys, if you don't know Howard, he was on our show, as I mentioned, a few episodes ago. We introduced you to the Long Island CW Club, and we talked a little bit about how to get going with Morse Code. And also, if you missed it, there was another great show that was just on last night, and that was with Josh on Hammerito Crash Course. Howard and who are the other two guests? I can't remember their names now.
W6JIM Jim and Flip KT9X.
Yes, yes, they were on and had a really great conversations. Very interesting about more about the CW Club, the Long Island CW Club, and so go ahead and check that out if you haven't done so. So tonight we're going to do something a little different, though. We're going to resume our conversation in a way from when we had Howard on before, and what we're going to do is take a deeper dive into some of the challenges that people face and how we might overcome them. So we also might talk a little bit about keys, but we're going to pause every once in a while and see if we can catch the comments and the questions in the chat. So if you do have a question, if you're struggling and you don't know kind of how to overcome your struggles, go ahead and throw that in the chat, and we'll address it, especially because I'm sure that you're not the only one that's experiencing maybe some of the challenges that you're facing. So go ahead and ask that, and I'm sure others would appreciate it. So with that, Howard, I'm going to throw the big question out right now, and that is, what do you think the biggest challenge is for people to learn Morse code who are beginners?
Well, the biggest challenge is actually something a few months down the road from learning and starting to learn. It's getting on the air. Charlie, there's such a deep fear that people have about making their first QSO. And, when we started this club 5 years ago, I was very surprised that even existed. Because when I was a kid, when we got started in 1965, nobody really had any fear about getting on the air. Yeah, it might be a little bit apprehensive, but there were a lot of kids our age in school that were ham radio operators. And as soon as you got in the air, you were able to talk to them and they'd be patting you on the back in school that day.
Yeah, you know what, Howard? That was my story as well. I remember my first contact and my first time getting on the air. It was on a Soda Summit, and sweaty hands, and oh my gosh, if I make one mistake, and when I did make mistakes, I'm like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. What am I going to do? They're going to hate me and all that stuff. I'm curious, throw in the chat, you guys, if any of you guys have that same experience where you either are or had a struggle getting on the air. I'd like to hear from you. But so true. I agree with that. I think that biggest challenge, but also it's the most important thing you can do in learning CW, is it not?
Well, that's what I say now. Look, after doing this teaching for 5 years, Charlie, it's our conclusion that you really got to get on the air after 3 or 4 months of study. And so we say now that take whatever you have, even if you don't know all the 40 characters by 3 or 4 months, enough with the computer generated code study, and you got to get on the air, because being on the air creates what they call white matter pathways to the brain, which you really need for competent CW copy, that you're not going to get by learning through an app or on your computer. And
I have to admit that I suffer from that as well. I mean, I've been fortunate enough that two operators have stuck with me, and I've got two CW QSOs, but I have great anxiety about getting on that hill the first time and just getting absolutely blasted and just getting totally lost, and then just kind of staying that way. That's kind of what I worry about.
Well, what we did in turn, Dan, was we structured the entire club to deal with helping people get over that fear. Because if that's the thing that's blocking people of getting to the end game, you're doing all this study to actually use the language you're studying. We had to do something about it. And what we did is we created a community that people would want to belong to, that gets support, that have fun. They're more relaxed. And when they're more relaxed, they'll be more willing to take chances and stick their toe in the water. And then again, we structure the classes and the teaching to be able to tell the people what they have to do and what's expected of them. And we also try and show that there's really no CW police out there, and there's nobody that's going to come knocking on your door if you make a mistake. And I always said this, and I said this last night in Josh's show. There's one thing that we don't allow in the Long Island CW Club. There's one thing we don't allow, and that's to say the word sorry.
Yes.
Because when people were sending, you know, they would make a mistake and they would say sorry, and they wouldn't even finish the sentence, and they might say sorry 5 times. And I said, that's it.
Yeah.
No more I'm sorry in the Long Island CW Club.
Howard put his foot down.
Yeah, I think that's the only time I did put my foot down, Charlie.
Yeah,
So throw in a bunch of dits and then just move on.
That's
Resend.
right. And if you make a mistake, I always say this about so let's say you do make a mistake. What do? Well, some people start sending like 20 dits. You don't even need to do that. If you're really not going to change with your mistake the spelling so drastically of a word, Dan, then keep moving on. And if you really think you blew the word and it might not be clear, just do the word again.
Yeah.
Don't even acknowledge that you made a mistake.
That makes sense. Yeah. If the context should be there with everything else that you're sending, just keep going. Otherwise, if you think it's a significant error, just resend that particular word again and move on.
That's right.
Yeah. And also, sorry, go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, I was also going to say, Charlie, like, and decoding. If you had, you know, let's say as a beginner, a graph paper in front of you where you have these little boxes and you fill in the boxes, and let's say you're missing letters once in a while. Let's say you're copying somebody's QTH. The guy's a W3. Well, in the old days, W3 was either Pennsylvania, Maryland, or Delaware, right? Now it could be anything, but it's still mostly those 3 states. The guy sends his QTH, PHI. You miss the rest of it, and then you hear IA at the end. Everybody would know that's Philadelphia. Now, are you copying 100%? No, you still got it. And even if you don't get it, you have his call sign already. Open up QRZ. His QTH is there, and double check your work. You're golden. So we try and tell everybody this, that there's really no need to be scared. But somebody has to show you that that's really the case. Yeah. Because the fear is deep. It is deep.
If I totally get lost, you know, on that first summit, and if I totally get lost, what's the best way I should kind of restart myself? Should I just send out some question marks, or should I just send out CQ again? What would be the best way to
you mean if you've missed someone's call sign that's calling, Dan?
Well, just that, you know, like you get several people that come in, for example, and I'm just totally lost in where I'm at, you know, with listening. Should I just send a question mark, or should I just send CQ out again?
Before I answer that question, Dan, let me just probe this a little bit deeper. Do you have any letters from anything, or is it complete 0?
I would say maybe I think I heard 1 or 2 possibilities.
Okay, if you have 1 or 2 possibilities, you take those possibilities and you go W or K question mark. Make it look like you have something, okay? The odds are that someone is there with a W or a K anyhow, and that will eliminate some of the people with an N, for example.
Right.
And the pileup will be 1 level lower, and see if you can hear it. But I would never call CQ again. That's exasperating, because everybody hears that there are other people calling you. And when people think that you're a running station, right, and you're calling CQ and everybody else is calling you, they'll probably think that maybe he's not copying well enough, and they might tune somebody else. So it's always best to question, or in the worst case scenario, if you have 0, Dan, go QRZ. Never go into a long CQ. QRZ question mark once, and then people will assume then, well, this poor guy's getting hammered with many people calling, and, you know, they'll use some techniques to try and get you to hear them. There's a number of techniques to use how to break a pileup.
Yeah. Cool. Brian and Dan, as you're thinking about your questions for Howard, let me just go back up to the top here and bring in some of the comments that were in the chat, and we'll take care of those, and then let you guys get a chance. So let me scroll back up here real quick, because I did see a few good ones. Let's see. So first of all, I said, hey, throw it in the chat. Lionel says, hey, yeah, massive anxiety. It sounds like he's having a hard time getting on the air. Lionel, if you know, is it just the fact, maybe you know, Lionel, it's just anxiety getting on the air, or maybe there's something more to it. Not quite sure. Cody says, I used to have debilitating mic fright, always afraid to chime in, and then and that was all via phone methods. I'm just starting my CW journey, and just doing it myself stresses me out. Cody, you know, I've been there. I think everybody at one point probably has. So if I don't know, maybe Howard has some suggestions here in a minute for that. Let's just move on real quick, and we'll remember that one. And then we have Jay that says, oh, yes, I was sweating and shaking. I made the QSO so short and worked my way up. Fist fright is real until you realize that they can't eat you. Yeah. And of course, our friend Jose says, I still do it if I step away for any length of time. And then let's see, we got here Noah, maybe the requirement made that fear go away, and now it's more like the public speaking syndrome. So many ops that are highly proficient listening to you. Maybe. And then no need to go back to the classes. I'm going to try with the straight key. Yay! Let's see if there's anything else here. That's about it. So yeah, let's go back up to this one. What do you think about that comment earlier? What one was that? I think it was right here, wasn't it? Was that the one? No, that wasn't it. You remember? Right here, probably, right? So,
well, you know, each one of these fellows mentioned certain degrees of anxiety getting involved in doing QSOs. Well, look, you know, Charlie, it's like anything in life. There was a very simple line that I heard when I was a kid: practice makes perfect, right? So if you practice and you're guided properly by Elmers how to do these things, the fear of the unknown of what you're going to have to do and what's expected of you becomes reduced. But even if you're conditioned, there's always that initial step of like diving in. You know, we have a lot of classes in the Long Island CW Club that deal with this, where we get people on the air. We're all on Zoom at the same time, and we're all listening to the same station, and we take turns going. There are many people, and this happens every week, that come into my particular class and they put on Zoom audit next to their name, meaning they just want to watch, and they don't want to be called on. Well, I always ask them, can you send your call sign? And if they say yes, I say, can you send 599? If they say yes to that, I said, can you send your state, the 2-letter state? If they say yes to those 3 things, I say, you know, you're ready to get on the air. You want to try it? And the majority of them say yes. We had a fellow just like that 2 weeks ago come into my class, and within 40 minutes, he left with his first 4 DX QSOs of his life on CW.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
One after another in Europe.
Wow.
And he's ecstatic.
That's cool.
And we give him a certificate. We give him a round of applause in the class. And then he gets all types of accolades from everybody in the club on Groups IO. It could only be exhilarating and confidence building, Charlie.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I remember the first time I got on the air, it was also, in addition to being anxiety ridden, it was exhilarating and exciting. I was on a high that I could not even believe. It was great.
But, you know, you got to eventually take the leap of faith. But if you take it with people holding your hand, you'll be okay. I can understand, you know, maybe at home being scared and what are these people going to think of me? Actually, they won't think anything of you. And even if they did, who cares? Because you're never going to meet them. But I could say that till I'm blue in the face, and it won't, you know, convince people to take the plunge. But if you're on Zoom and you have 30 people encouraging you and professionals that know what they're doing, why not try it? And
Yeah.
the majority do.
Yeah.
And once they've done it, there's no turning back. They keep going forward.
Yeah. We're going to let Brian hop in here because he may have something to say. But before we do, real quick, what is the smallest QSO you can have in CW?
Well, we call them the 599 QSOs. And, Dan, the way this is going, there's more and more of them these days. Back in the day, there was more rack choose, but, now it's a 599. So what does that mean? So a DX station is calling CQ. You call him. You don't even say his call sign. You drop your call sign in there. So it would be W2XYZ. He says W2XYZ 599. He doesn't even give you the 9. He gives you 5NN, N standing for the 9. He doesn't even give you a K. There's a silence. It's your turn to go. So all he's interested in is your signal report. He doesn't care about your name and your QTH. So you go 5NN. You don't say DEW2XYZ. You don't say 73. You don't say anything. And you're done. And you're in the guy's log. That's it. That's about the quickest. So we call that like a 599 guy.
Yeah. So in a way, if you find a good contest where they're going at a speed that you can work, you could actually get a lot of good practice just sending 599.
Well, you can, and that gets you. Not that that's so exciting for everybody to be sending 599 to everybody, but we do that in our class because it gives you confidence. It gives you timing. It tells you can do it. You see how the exchange goes. You see that it's not hard, and you take that from there. And then, okay, you want to get into a QSO where you really learn something about the guy. You can do that too.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
What's the best way to give, an honest call, an honest signal report? One of the things I've always kind of looked for was some kind of, recordings of examples of, different numbers of call signs and an explanation why this one is not a 599, kind of, but I've never found anything like that.
Well, I'll tell you how this 599, this 5NN developed. To legally just put somebody in the log, you need to have a signal report. You don't have to have their QTH and you don't have to have their name. So if you're doing rapid fire, the 599 becomes, 5NN. And you know something, there's even an abbreviation for a 5 where you could just give a dot. I don't like it. So you could hear a dot NN, and that's your signal report too.
Oh, wow.
Signal reports back in the day, Dan, I got started when this type of equipment was very popular over here, So I got started in 1965 where you could have a radio, a receiver that doesn't even have an S meter. I have one up in my shelf here. I have an SX 100 here that doesn't have an S meter. Okay. So you use that readability, signal, strength, tone rather, RST, readability, signal, and tone to do your reporting. So it was kind of a judgmental thing whether or not you would give someone a 7 or a 6. But how did it really work, Dan, in real time? You would never give somebody a 1, and you would never give somebody a 2. And even today, you really don't, because it's kind of almost like an insulting number in a way. So if you can't hear somebody, you give them a 3. Throw them a 3. Okay? If you can hear him, but he's not strong, you throw him a 5. If he's strong and you're comfortable, a 7. Now, if he's blowing you out of your chair, you give him a 9 or a 9 plus. Now, the same thing on the readability side on the R. You never give a guy a 1 or a 2, because below a 3, you can't hear him anyhow. So what are you going to make this guy cry in his beer, giving him a 1, right? There was one of the young ladies in the club the other day that gave somebody a 259, and we were a 229, and we were going crazy on her. We were kidding her, and now that's a joke, giving someone a 229. So a 3 is enough to tell someone you're struggling with reception. Now, what did the tone mean? Back in the day, rigs like this really had tone problems because they had power supplies that weren't, digital. And they had real electrolytic capacitors that could leak, that could give them buzzing tones. And that was against the rules according to the FCC, and you can get a notice for that. So if somebody gave you less than 9, which is the perfect tone, it was a good thing to know so that you could fix it. But today, unless you hear an old military rig or something, chirping is very hard to find. So just about everybody's a 9. So that 9 has become very generic. So everybody gets a 9.
Mhm.
The other thing that you can do, if you see an S7 on your S meter, Dan, you can give the guy a 7. You see a 9, give him a 9. You have a 5, you give him a 5. Now everybody has meters. So that's basically how RST has evolved into today. That's a long-winded answer, but I happen to like this subject, and I wrote an article on this once.
Very good. Brian, I'm glad you could make it, buddy. Come on in. Tell us what you got.
Yeah, Microsoft was had other plans for my computer, so we got that finally going about a minute after everything kicked off. Hi, Howard.
Hi, good to see you, Brian.
Good to see you. Good to see you too. I was going to say, a lot of the smaller radios that people are using out in the field. I know mine. The S meter on it is open to interpretation as far as what you're going to go. So a lot of times I just have to use my ear. I've actually given somebody a tone report of less than 9 once.
Yeah.
And it was somebody who was operating portable at another summit, doing a summit to summit with me, and his battery was dying. So his the tone was horrible. It actually sounded almost like RF was getting into the radio, and it turned out that his PLL circuit was about to unlock, and that's why his tone was terrible. But it definitely sounded like something was wrong with the radio. But otherwise, I don't think I've ever given somebody not given somebody a 9 before, except for that one time.
Well, look, back in the day in the 60s, tones. I mean, if you were going to work Cuba, Brian,
yeah,
everybody's toned down there because all those radios were working on borrowed time, and on top of that, that power system was a disaster. Yeah. So everybody you heard that chirp, you knew it was Cuba or Russia, Russia, Romania, East Europe, all of that stuff. They had the tone problem. So if you really wanted to tell them the truth, but in a way, even back then, Brian, why tell someone the truth that can't fix their situation? So
exactly.
It became academic what the tone was.
Yeah, I'm used to getting 229s a lot when I'm operating up on the summits because I'm usually using, less than 4 watts or less. And sometimes the signals are real tough and you go back and forth. And honestly, those are the exchanges in code that I enjoy the most, are the really, really weak ones that you got to work real hard to get, because I think that's a blast. I really enjoy doing that.
Yeah.
I would say I rarely give out a 229. If I really can't hear somebody, I would say 339 would be my lowest number, but that's just me,
Yeah, no, I get it. Charlie, you've gotten a lot of 229s, I'm sure, right?
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially from you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I try to give you, I give you 119.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
And then I tell you my shoe size usually.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, look, if somebody like you guys has gone all the way up to a summit, and I know you have QRP and a compromised antenna, I don't want to hurt your feelings with a 229. If I'm copying you, I'll throw you the 539. Okay. I got
all
it.
right.
What's the difference? I throw you a bone.
Tip of the hat to you.
Okay, guys. So let's go on to another challenge or a way that we can learn Morse code. Let's help the guys in the chat and who will be watching later. If you guys have a question in chat, go ahead and throw that in, or Brian and Dan hop in. I would say the next question I wanted to ask you or pose to you and the chat. Say I'm brand new and I need to start learning somewhere, like with my letters. I'll just tell you. When I started learning, I tried several different things. I tried an app on my phone, actually a couple different apps on my phone. I tried audio recordings and one other little software program. And in the end, for me, what worked the best was the app. I could just sit down. It was almost like playing a game. Every 5-10 minutes, every time I'd grab 5 or 10 minutes, I'd just look at my phone, and it was almost like a game. I'd listen to it, and I'd choose which tone I was hearing. And but Howard, what are you telling your students the best way to learn letters is? How to get started and start learning those letters? Is there tools out there that you enjoy? And then in the chat, what do you guys use? Throw in what you guys have used or do use. Go ahead, Howard.
I'll tell you what my take is on this question, and we get this question all the time, Charlie. And this is a summary after teaching many students now for 5 years. Okay, Today, the common thought process is that you should learn with the Farnsworth method, which means that you're delivered the CW at a higher character speed, like 20 words a minute, but slowed down to 5 words a minute in spacing. The reason behind that is they feel that you won't be counting the dots and dashes, which maybe could be a problem later on. That's the theory behind this Farnsworth method, which is not a new method because Farnsworth was, I think, active in ham radio in the 40s and the 50s and 60s, right? Then there's which order of letters do you learn from? A, B, C, D, E, or based on dots like EISH5, or another one. We happen to use the Koch order of letters. Koch was a German psychologist, and he wrote many years ago that he felt that if you start off with K, S, M, and R, you'd be less apt to memorize the characters as opposed to learning their sound. So, okay, there's many different ways to start. So pick one. So the Long Island CW Club decided to go with the common denominator of Koch and Farnsworth. But what's my personal take on this? I learned from a 78 record. I still have it here. And it was sending me random 5-letter code groups. No words, no nothing. Starting off at a true 5 words a minute. There was no Farnsworth. There was no fast delivery of characters. I still got to 15 words a minute in a year. Of course, we had to, because back then you had to take a 13-word per minute exam at the FCC. And if you didn't pass that, you go back to square one and have to take your novice again. Nobody would want to do that. So there was quite a incentive. But where am I going with this? There's many apps, and we ask people that come into the club, well, what do they use? And I made a compendium of this. There were hundreds of apps to use. Now, which one does the club use? We decided to use G4FON. We happen to like that, and it was made by Ray G4FON. May he rest in peace. We unfortunately lost him last year, and we happen to like that program. But there's plenty of other good programs you can get on your phone. CW Player is another one. That LCWO, a lot of people like to use, probably the most popular. But where am I going with this answer? It doesn't really matter to me how you learn Morse code. You could go and learn and memorize from a chart, which they say is heresy. Doesn't bother me, providing you get on the air within 3 or 4 months.
Back to the 3 or 4 months.
Because if you're not on the air, I don't care what program you're using, you're going to stall, you're going to get plateaus, you're going to get discouraged, you're going to get bored, and none of this is going to mean anything to you. It's like any language that you use. I remember when I started taking Spanish as a kid in 8th grade, the teacher stopped speaking English the first day. We didn't know one word of Spanish besides maybe hola. And we asked, why are you doing that? And she said, you got to be immersed in this from day one. So you have to use the language of Morse code that you're learning as soon as you can. And I think 3 or 4 months after taking, let's say, 2 classes a week with us or with anybody else and practicing 15, 20 minutes a day is enough. And even if you have only 30% or 50% or 70% of the characters down, when you get on the air and you start using it, it'll become more apparent and it'll all coalesce.
Yeah. Very good. Let me just recognize Richie Radio Room. He just donated $3 to us. Thank you so much. Brian or Dan, any other thing? Anything to add?
I agree with Howard about getting on the air as soon as possible, because even though I went through the class and I did pretty well, I think that was my biggest stumbling block, is that I just did not get on the air right away, even chasing to make it stick. So, consequently now I'm kind of going back to kind of starting over again, which really delays everything.
What are you using, Dan, right now to learn your letters and stuff?
I am using the LCWO. They've got that Morse machine. I really enjoy using that on there. and then also using my KX3 and using that for sending practice.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, early on for me, the first time I really where I wasn't at home and I was doing portable, I got pushed by soda chasers to get onto CW on top of the mountains. I originally did like the first probably 18 activations I did all phone. And the key, I didn't even have a really good key. I actually took a mouse and converted it into a CW key and used a mouse for my key. And that was it. I was really slow. I mean, probably 5-7 words a minute slow, cranking through it and got it going. And then over time, I started at home. I got interested in getting the triple play WAS award from the ARRL, and I was missing CW. I had everything else all racked through. So I started making skeds with people in different states to work my way through it. And that helped a lot because at least I knew who I was working with. We were doing something similar to what the Long Island CW club does, where you've also got the internet up in the background so you can talk, you're able to exchange or at least talk about what's going to happen first and then go through and make the contact. And little by little, I started getting my confidence up. And then finally, I decided I was going to go straight CW all the way, doing all of my activations, and it took off from there. And then I say there was one particular day where speed wise, I was forced to go faster because I was on a mountain up in the Sholo area and the weather turned and it got really bad really fast. And I was 2 contacts short of having the summit activated. So I turned the speed all the way up to 18 words a minute on the 817 and just started sending and managed to get 3 more contacts in and ran off the mountain before the weather turned really dangerous and got back down to the car. And I never turned the speed back down after that. So it kind of forced me to start going faster and learning faster. Now, I've done some early on. I did some of the classes with the Long Island CW club, but ultimately with my schedule, it was very hard to make a lot of them just because of the way my work schedule works for what I needed, as I was really past a lot of the beginner stuff. I did one of the classes with CW Ops, and that was really good. And then I've done a lot of stuff with Kurt's files off the internet. And those have been really helpful with working on the head copy. And that's for me right now, that's my goal, is head copy at 25 plus. If I'm running, contest style or simple exchanges, I can go well past 25 without any trouble. Well past 25. In fact, Charlie and I were talking about this yesterday. And what I find myself having happen now is the first pass in the brain is right. The second pass that I do not using the subconscious brain is usually wrong. So the first time I hear it, it's right. And when I second guess it, I get it wrong. That's the funny thing that happens to me. So I'm learning to settle down now and just go with what I thought I heard the first time and not overthink it. And obviously that all happens really fast because of the speed you're going at that point. But when I go back through my journey, I can think of multiple times where that was exactly what was going on early on too, where I was not trusting what I heard the first time and I was overthinking it.
Well, congratulations on your progress. It's a very nice story, Brian. And as you can see, it kind of confirms what we were talking about before, that to advance, all of this has to be done using the language that you've studied.
Yeah, for sure.
It's true. It's true with any language. If you were going to study any language in school, if you're not out there speaking, you're just like book learned and you can't converse. You can get all A's on your exams, but you can't really speak.
Yep.
Yeah, I had very, very recently, I had an opportunity where I was in a large group of professionals, not amateur radio folks, and I got asked about Morse code in the group and how to understand it and how it works and how do you get that, because it seems so foreign to them, and explain to them, it's a language, and first of all you have to learn it as a language. And one of the things we asked the group, how fast do you think we're speaking right now? How many words a minute do you think we're exchanging? And I got different answers. And, I said, the average person's talking at about 120 words a minute when we're talking back and forth and you're a fluent language speaker. And nobody came even close to that. The numbers were lower. So, we were explaining this. Well, how does Morse code work? So I took a simple sentence and very quickly spelled out the sentence letter by letter. I said, and that's essentially what your brain's hearing in Morse code. And as you become more proficient, you don't hear the letters anymore. You hear the words as the speed comes up and as you get more proficient. I said, it's the same thing when you're speaking a foreign language. And it was interesting explaining it to this group of people because none of them are radio people. This was not a radio event at all. And in fact, next week I'll share the story behind where all this is coming from. But you can see some of the light bulbs start clicking, especially the bilingual people, because when I started talking to it in that context, then they understood what I was talking about. And the non-bilingual folks that were in the room, I think it started sort of making sense because some of them were digging back to, their grade school Spanish or French or whatever class they had to take in high school. And then they started saying, oh yeah, well, that's right. That's why the teacher would only speak the, French or Spanish or whatever it is that they were learning at the time. And when I, now when I'm starting to explain it to other radio operators or, fellow hams that are looking to learn, you kind of have to, I explain it in the same context, and it seems to help them grasp where they need to go or what they're looking to accomplish. And it gives them a different way of thinking about learning it. Because if you learn it mechanically, I don't think you're going to be successful, or you're going to plateau really fast.
Yep. Well, on this same topic here, we've got a question from Mark. I would like to know how to move off of paper and get into head copy of the Morse. And I guess in other words, he must be like many of us who have we write down each letter as it comes to us on the paper, and then we go back and read it instead of, as we hear something come through, we actually hear it in our mind and know what it is and can process it. So how do we do that? I mean, Brian kind of had some ideas. Do you have any other thoughts on this, Howard? Well,
this is going to be a lengthy discussion if we really want to go into the details of head copy. But let's start. On that particular point, head copy is really not in play until you're about 18 words a minute. Below those speeds, you really don't need it. And sometimes when it's too slow, you have to hold it in your head someplace, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And if it's going at a slow clip, it's more difficult to hold it and visualize it because it's not coming to you quick enough. So at speeds above 18 words a minute, and especially in the 20s, you really need to head copy because it's too difficult and cumbersome to write at those speeds. So how do you do it? Well, I was saying this last night, Charlie. There's really nothing that I've ever read on the internet on how to learn head copy or how to teach it that made sense to me. So I basically came up with a way to teach this. I've been teaching head copy now for 5 years in the Long Island CW Club. So I had to come up with a way to do it. And I based it on my personal experience to at least share with everybody else how I do it. And if the people can eventually do it like that, fine. And if they can't, it's okay too. There's no requirement to do head copy. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, or if you can't. It doesn't matter. There's no pressure to get into the 20 word a minute range of Morse code. There's plenty of CW to be done very comfortably at 13 to 15 words a minute all day, SKCC and all of that. And a lot of parks on the air run at those speeds. So I teach that head copy is a multifaceted delivery system. You look at the CW in a multifaceted way. Monochromatic CW to me is what's coming out of computer-generated code at 700 hertz to you. It's got no flavor to it, no variance. On the air, you're challenged with QSB, QRN, QRM, interference from digital. You got everything going on, and there's many things challenging you. So you have to be able to deal with that while you're head copying because it's not coming to you clean. So I believe that instant recognition, which a lot of people talk about, is being head copy. I believe that instant recognition just gets the CW into your ear. It's outside of your head. It's more than just recognizing words. I don't talk about recognizing words. I talk about embracing the whole delivery. Now, how do we get there? The weakest delivery to me, Charlie, is the actual tone of the CW. That's just to get it into my head. Once it's in my head, I have to put it on a moving conveyance because it's a moving language. And I visualize it on a ticker tape. Just the same type of ticker tape that you'd see on the bottom of CNN or something that wraps around a building in Times Square on New Year's Eve. And it moves and you hold and you place your decode there. Some people can't do that. They have to put it on a stationary blackboard, so to speak. But that doesn't get them as far as they should be able to go. There's other components of the CW delivery. I sense the vibrations from it. To me, it's very vibrational. As you can see, without even thinking, I'm pointing to my chest here. I take the vibration from the CW and I put it right here and I let it vibrate, you know, in an imaginary way, this part of my body. So we have the visual movement, you know, on a ticker tape. We have vibration that I'm bracing. Then I actually see the individual dots and dashes. So when people come to me early on and say, I blew it, I copied CW from a chart and I learned the wrong way and I'm counting, I say, don't worry about that. We'll count over 20 words a minute, but we'll count in a different way. We'll use that. So I count visually the dots and the dashes.
Very interesting.
So I see all of this going on at the same time. And I also play with the decode. I have a moving ticker tape. I have a parallel stationary check ticker tape to bounce back and forth in my mind visually when I'm trying to determine what the word should be if there's interference. Now, I believe that all of these components put together compensate when a letter drops out. So all of this that I'm telling you, these 5 pathways go into your subconscious mind that Kurt talks a lot about, you know,
Yes.
of
Yes.
Ninja, right?
Morse
And
Code
you
Ninja. Yeah.
use your conscious mind to tie it all together. So the conscious mind is analyzing the subconscious tracks. Now, if this sounds like impossible for people, I can only tell what I do. Now, I've been at this 57 years, Charlie. You know, some people said that there was not a rattle in my crib, there was a key, you know? So I've been around a long time. So I don't know if someone today who's just starting, who's 50 or 60 years old, is going to develop this. But the interesting thing about it is that people come to my classes and they start telling me, you know, Howard, this happened to me. I saw it. I felt it. I imagined the other day where that signal was, and I imagined what the guy's QTH was, and I was right. So I get reinforcements that I'm doing the right thing. But this is the long-winded answer to this fellow who asked a very broad question: how do I get to head copy? I can't tell you this in 1 minute. It's a very broad thing, and I teach this with various different drills. We change drills every 10 minutes in the head copy class every Tuesday night to get you to see these things.
Yeah.
And I think it's working.
Yeah, so I would say the answer is the shorter answer, even shorter than what you gave, is to go to your class and participate and find out more if you're really at that point where you want to learn to head copy, I would say.
Yeah, it's a very cerebral thing to me. Now, somebody else might write something else and they say you got to, you know, memorize the sound of the words, and they got Wordsworth. They talk about this Wordsworth thing. I read that 10 times and it doesn't mean anything, but that's just me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I can only talk what I feel. I'm never going to criticize someone else's way of teaching or learning, but this is me.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. And a lot of other people in the chat are kind of recognizing, yeah, that's it's hard, but it sounds like it's right. And they're very interested. They think it's amazing what you're talking about. Okay, guys, we have 10 minutes to the top of the hour. I don't know if Howard, if we go over a little bit, if that'll be okay with you.
You know, Charlie, as I said last week, you guys want to talk 2 hours about this, I'm game. I mean,
Well,
not to force you to do it, but
yeah,
this is my thing. I love this.
yeah, and you know, 1 hour is just such a short time. Let's go a little longer. Let's just see where it takes us. We'll kind of know when we need to quit. But we may go over an hour a little bit. Let's take it back. So we've talked a little bit about the biggest obstacle for people who are learning. We actually gave some time to people who are more advanced and talked about that a little bit. So my next question, and Dan and Brian, if you have a question, let me know, and we'll throw that up for you for everybody here as well. But my next one is, if I'm learning and I think I'm ready to get on the air, where do I go that's a safe place to have some QSOs? Now, we know that the Long Island CW Club has a safe place for that. But, you know, somebody may want to branch out a little bit and go somewhere else. What are some places that people can go where they can feel safe and not have that anxiety or have less of it?
Well, let's talk about the band plans of CW. Let's take 40 meters. That's a band that everybody usually works. Okay. So the extra part of the band is from 7 to 7025. That's usually your fastest segment and where the majority of the DX is. So in that particular area, you're going to hear your speeds of 20 words a minute plus. Every kilohertz that you move up above 7025, it starts to slow down. It's an interesting phenomenon, but that's the way it is. As you get, you know, almost near where the FT8 area is, 7050, 7055, 7060, that's really the hangout where people are who are beginners or sending slower. That's where you have the straight key century club people, some people who are doing Poda and Soda that are not as fast as others, and, you know, some QSO parties and you know, local type of contests. You can get plenty of action there between 10 and 15 words a minute. Now, even higher on the 40 meter band, above 7100. So you skip over FT8, you skip over where the RTTY is. Above 7100 is where the old novice band used to be. As a matter of fact, you can't see this here, but I'm staring at my novice rig, my DX60. In the back, it still has the crystals where I left them 50 years ago, and I think I got 7160 sitting in the back there. You like that, Brian, huh? So, you know, there's people up there that really send as slow as 10 words a minute and 8 words a minute. Now, they're not always up there. It's not the busiest section, but, you know, if you called a CQ up there at 10 words a minute, you probably would get an answer.
Ooh, that would be scary. Getting an answer. Anxiety all over again.
You know, look.
I don't mean that in a mocking way.
This is we talk about the fear again, and what do you do? Look, you have QRZ.com. It's a great website, right? If you get, you know, NJ7V, if you got that, you really don't need any other information from the guy who called you. If you don't hear the signal report, who cares? You got Charlie's QTH on QRZ. You got his name. His name is Charlie. Maybe you heard a C. Yeah, you really know I'm speaking to Charlie, right?
Yeah.
He sends you his rig and weather. You don't copy it. Okay, you send your rig and weather. He comes back and he says 73s, and you say, okay, my wife's calling me for dinner. I'm out of here. You're done. You've done your QSO. It's not that bad.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. We have a question that Jay Pope put up, and but before we answer this question, and Jay, his question is: I know this is this, but I wanted to ask, what is said in a basic CW contact? This is always a question I had as a new guy, and it's a good question that Jay has, and we'll answer that because I'm sure there's other people out there. However, I don't want to hog all the time. Dan or Brian, do you have anything else you want to contribute to the conversation at this point?
I do. On just another point that Howard brought up about QRZ, I guess same kind of thing. If you're a soda or a Poda chaser, if you go to where the spotting pages are, and you're tuned down that frequency, and even if you think you've got 3/4 of the call sign, you probably know who it is on that frequency, and you can try to make the contact and get the rest of his call sign by simply listening a few times and listening to his cadence about how he sends, because usually those folks they're going to be there for a little while, so you've got some time to get their full call sign.
And there's spotting networks too. You can find these people on the clusters.
True.
And people have done the work for you already.
I was going to say, don't forget the SSTs too. Those are really good places to start with a fairly simple, unthreatening QSO, and that'll be starting soon, actually.
Yeah, I mean the SST is going to start in 6 minutes.
What is it?
Yeah,
some people may not know.
K1USN is a club in Massachusetts, and they have a slow speed contest every Friday and Sunday, and the speeds are supposed to be between 10 and 15 words a minute. I operate that every Sunday. We have a class that's dedicated to the SST. It's going to be starting in a few minutes, and we help people make their first contacts in that. We're on Zoom watching over you, and we'll make the contacts with you. I do the SST every Sunday I can, and I send no faster than 13 words a minute. I run, and I make about 30-something contacts.
Yeah, that sounds like a good place to start for sure. Yeah.
That's another good place to start. Sure is.
Yep. And another good place, as Scout pointed out, is Soda and Poda. You wouldn't think so, maybe. Some people might not. But it is a great place because you know what the exchange is going to be. And in my opinion and in my experience, everybody there is very kind, very forgiving, and very easy to work.
Soda and Poda are great things, and they're one of the major factors driving CW, because the young people are really interested in this. It's a great thing. I mean, it's an offshoot from the original National Parks on the Air. It's a shame that stopped, but this is the next best thing to being there.
Yep. All right. So then, what about this question? I assume there are new people who may be listening or watching who want to know what is said in a basic CW contact. Can you cover that?
Yeah, we call this the protocol. And we've actually written a document that we have in our club Dropbox, which you can print out and have right by your side. Oh, you got it right there, Brian. So
hold it up again, Brian, so everybody can see it.
There it is.
Oh, yeah.
The fellow that was on Josh's show with us last night, Jim W6JIM, did a beautiful job on preparing that. But what is protocol? Okay, let me just go through the basics. Do we have time, Charlie?
Yeah, we do. Yes.
Okay, we call it protocol 1. Let's say you call a CQ. You got an answer. What do you say to the guy? It's not really polite, so to speak, to go right into the signal report. So you should have what we call a salutation first. And that really shows the other guy that you kind of know something about CW. So you say, thanks for the call. You don't say thanks for the QSO, because you haven't made the QSO yet. Thanks for the call. It's a nice greeting. Good evening, GE, thanks for the call. Your RST, such and such. We talked about RST and how it's derived. The next thing you say is the QTH. Now, some people, or maybe 1/3 of the people, put the name after the signal report. Why do we want the QTH? I'll tell you where that comes from. If you have rough band conditions, let's say you're doing CW on 6 meters, where you're going to have a matter of seconds to make an exchange before that E layer is going to disappear, right? You want to get your QTH to that guy. And this comes from years ago, before we had the internet and you could look up people on QRZ. the QTH is more important than whether the guy's name is Joe or Bob, right? You want to know who you're talking to and where he is. So get the QTH done second. Then the name you do. Then over to you. He does the same thing. Thanks for the report. You say something in a salutation. Thank you for the nice report. If he gave you a 5NN, you know, you're 599 in Philadelphia again, and the name is Howard and so. Then you come back and there's a little bit of a rack chew. My rig is such and such. My antenna is such and such. And it's 20 degrees here and cloudy. Huh. You go back. He does the same thing. Then you come back. You're at protocol 3. What do? Say something nice. Well, my age is 52. I've been a ham for 30 years. That's enough. Back to him. He says the same thing. Now, if you want to go past that protocol 3, you're really in rag chew territory. Say anything you want. What would be the next logical thing to say? Well, I'm a retired engineer, and maybe something you like to do. You know, I like fishing and such. Back to you. And he says the same thing. At 15 words a minute or 13 words a minute, once you get to a stage 4 QSO, you're talking 30 minutes. You're probably tired already. That's enough. Throw in the towel, say, listen, thanks for the QSO. I really enjoyed it. 73s, I'll see you again. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Now, if you're really doing well and you want to get to know this guy, then talk about other things. You know, I got this hobby. I'm into, antique cars, and I got a 1956 Oldsmobile in my garage. That guy comes back and, hey, you want to know something? I got a 1970 Camaro. I really love it. That's great. You got something else in common with this guy.
Yeah.
It's a dance. Being in a QSO is like a dance or a tennis match.
Uh-huh.
And if you're both dancing correctly, it flows.
Cool. Good. Thank you for that, Howard. Let's do this. Let's ask those of you who are listening and who are in chat, give you an opportunity to ask any other question that you might have, and we'll give you a minute to pop that into the chat, and we'll take one more question if it's a good one, and see if we can address that. In the meantime, let's turn it back over to Brian and Dan and see if they have anything else that they'd like to contribute and to give the chat people a little bit of time. And if not, then I have another a comment or two.
Well, for me, I think it's time that I just put up my soda dipole to start listening and hitting a few soda people. I guess I just need to get out there and just give it a whirl. Start chasing at least.
Yeah, my comment was going to be the more you do it, the slower it's going to get. So keep trying. Just get out there, do it. Don't worry about it. I speak from experience when I say this now. The more you operate, the more you do it, the slower it's going to get.
So I kind of a question more for Brian, but when you started out, you talked about, you went up on a summit and started sending because a lot of people encouraged you to do that. But so before you actually did that on a summit, did you chase a little bit before you actually went out there and hit the summit right away and started sending CW?
So what I was doing before that was what I like to call rehearsed opportunistic DX chasing. So when I knew there was a DX edition going on and it was someone that I wanted to work and it was going to be on 80 meters or 160 meters or 40 meters where I have a compromised antenna and CW is going to be king, I would actually go on one of the online code generating programs and put in the DX station's call sign, signal report, and my call sign, and make a 25 word per minute recording of it and stick it in my phone and listen to that as I drove back and forth to work. So I could recognize what it sounded like and got used to hearing it. And then eventually the opportunity would come up. I would hear the station. It would be on when I needed to work them. And I would send my call sign with my venture key and wait. And I could recognize my call sign because I do believe that, and I'm sure Howard probably backed me up on this. Once you know what your call sign sounds like, it doesn't matter what speed it comes back at you at, you'll know it's you. So I was very comfortable with hearing it at a very high rate of speed because I knew what my call sounded like. And I also knew what 599 sounded like. And as Howard, has pointed out before, that's a pretty standard DX exchange. That was kind of how I got my feet wet with CW, was those types of contacts. And then I started working on that triple play WAS, and that was at a much slower speed with very good operators and who were super patient and helped me get through the whole process. And I said, we were backing it up with the internet. If anybody remembers the K3 UK SCED page, that's where I was doing a lot of that work out of, which for me at the time was really good because it helped build my confidence up. And I actually have made a lot of radio friends through that page that I still keep in touch with to this day. And then it progressed into Soda, and Soda was just Tommy and Ray and Pete when I was doing my first like real HF summit, pushing me to get on CW on 12 meters and work them on 12 meter CW because we had the challenge going on at the time, and they couldn't hear me on phone, but they figured they could hear me on CW. And that's kind of how it all started for me with Soda, was that particular activation. And then from there, I realized, wow, this is pretty cool. It's challenging. I like this. I want to do this. So I'm just going to do it. And if I suck, oh, well, you'll have to deal with it. We'll get there eventually. But I'm the one I'm in the driver's seat. You want to work me. So you're just going to have to put up with this till I get better. And that's kind of for lack of a better way of describing it, that's kind of the attitude I took from the beginning. You want to talk to me. I'm the good looking girl at the bar. So you're going to buy me a drink. That's kind of where it started from.
that should work for me. You mentioned DX too. And because one of my goals that I've got this year is that I want to be proficient enough in CW because Bouvet Island is scheduled to go off this year. And that's my goal, is to get a Bouvet Island CW contact, because I'm not going to get it single sideband, that's for sure. And who knows, in my lifetime, Bouvet Island will not go off again. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, guys. Well, let's wrap it up. I didn't see any more questions in the chat, so I think that maybe we did good. We did a little deep dive. We helped maybe a few people out get a little bit further along the path, and hopefully get over some of the I would call it, for lack of a better word, mic fright, but it's not really that. Whatever it is, the anxiety to get on the air. Takeaways for me is one. Just get on the air. That's, I think, the biggest one, and probably one that Howard would say every time he talks to anybody: get on the air. Also, to get head copy up, it's a long process. You might want to consider Howard's class, and it's he said 57 years it took him to, maybe not the whole time, but he's been doing it a while. So for me, it's a slow process. I'm getting better at it. I think it's just kind of gonna stick with it. And so, Howard, thank you so much for joining us. We'll do a round robin here real quick. We'll give Dan and Brian a chance to sayonara, and then I'll say something, and you can close. And after that, we'll meet back out in the offline. So go ahead, Dan.
We just want to say, Howard, thanks. The encouragement, I think, is really great for a person like me, and I think for a lot of folks in the chat room. So. Tomorrow I've got the day off, so it looks like I'll be stringing up my Soda antenna out in front of the office here so that I can listen and start practicing sending my call sign out there and see if I can't grab a contact or two this week.
Cool. Sounds good. Brian?
So yeah, I'm going to be, I'll be out and on the air and out and about. And I said, probably next live stream, I'll have some news on some changes, good changes that are coming to me in my professional life. And I said, I went to my P.O. box. I've been so busy, and I got a nice Christmas card from the Morse Code Ninja himself.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
cool.
picked it up today. So fair. I was going
awesome.
to share that in the opening today, but Microsoft was not allowing me to do that. They had some important updates that they needed me to have before I could have my webcam work properly. So missed that in the beginning, but I wanted to get that on there.
Cool. All right, Brian. And then for me, all those who are listening, if you catch this, you're live, or if you catch this soon enough, tomorrow, Sandy and I, as I mentioned before, will be out on a summits on actually 3 different peaks. So a lot of opportunity all day tomorrow to work us if you want. Sandy will be on sideband. I'll be doing CW. So with that, Howard, it's you to close it out for us.
Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for having me on the show again. It's an honor to be here. what you're doing for ham radio is excellent. Having these YouTube shows and bringing so many interesting topics available to thousands of people, and also, you know, the interest that you're taking in CW. I really appreciate it, and it's great. And Charlie, when I was watching your video a few weeks ago when you were up on top of that mountain and using your little paddle there and banging out those contacts one after another, I was very excited for you, and it was great. And so keep up the good work, the three of you guys. Dan, I hope that next time I come on the show, you'll already be telling me about some of the DXQSOs you made. And, you know, Brian, keep up the good work on your soda too. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed being here again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Howard.
bye everybody.
Bye, everyone. 73.